introduction. I can actually skip over my first couple of slides now. So basically I started Little Yellow Bird about 3 years ago, and as mentioned, we manufacture uniforms. The key difference with our uniforms is that they're all ethically sourced. They're all manufactured in India under fair conditions, and we exclusively use organic fair trade cotton. And we supply, about 200 different businesses. These are some of the companies that we are now supplying. You might notice a little bit of a trend or a theme with some of those companies, but we're also starting to get more inquiries from, I guess, more of the mainstream businesses as well that can see value in switching their uniforms to a more sustainable alternative. Excuse me. So as mentioned in the intro, I spent about 6 years working in the Air Force before I started Little Yellow Bird, and it was a job and a role that I absolutely loved. So I joined the military when I was about 18 and became a logistics officer. I got to be involved in heaps of really amazing projects and exercises, both in New Zealand and overseas. And I loved this role until pretty much just one day I just stopped enjoying doing what I was doing. And I spent about 6 months trying to sort of re-find my passion or why in this industry, and I just couldn't find it. And I talked to my bosses about it. They said basically I just had to suck it up for another 2 years because that's kind of what the military is about. And I did for a couple of months, and then I realised that life's too short to spend your time doing something that you don't absolutely love or are not passionate about. So I left the military, moved back home with my parents, which was fun, and went back to uni because I didn't have a plan and I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. And when I moved back home, I looked in this book that I had, written, in high school or something, and I'd had like goals. It was like I think it was a workshop we'd done in school actually, like where do you want to be when you're 30? And one of the things that I'd written in there was start a company at age 30. And I don't know why back when I was 18 I thought you had to be 30 to start a company. But I guess maybe I thought that you had to have money or you had to have connections or you had to have experience. But when I was at university, again, there was a business competition. So I thought, why not just submit an idea? I didn't really have many great ideas at the time, but I ran one by my sister, which was basically women's business shirts, because I'd always been supplied a uniform, and then all of a sudden I had a part-time job working in a corporate role, and I just couldn't find anything that was organic or fair trade or locally made, or even just that I liked. Even the general options for women's corporate wear were pretty slim. And I ran it by my sister, who was a lawyer, and she was like, oh yeah, that's an all right idea, Sam, you should do that one. So I submitted that idea to this business competition and went about creating this line of women's business shirts. And I'm not kidding, our first line was so ugly that not even like my friends and family purchased them because they were just terrible, they were awful. But the good thing about them, or the thing that was really intentional about them, was that they'd been made under fair conditions, and we'd been really intentional about using only organic cotton, knowing who our suppliers were. But at that stage, I was still pretty naive. I actually didn't know all that much about all the issues relating to the garment industry. I knew about Rana Plaza and I knew about the social implications, but I didn't know about any of the wider implications that exist. And so when I started off, we set out to make sure that the workers were treated fairly. But what I soon discovered was that there was all these other elements and layers to this whole industry that I had no idea about. And so that quickly kind of changed the direction and path that we went down. So today we're really focused also on the environmental aspects of the garment industry, which are just as important as the social factors. Some of the things that I discovered when I first started researching and working in this industry that were really shocking were things like, there's a saying in China that you can tell the it colour of the season by the colour of the waterways. And I also learned about the Aral Sea, which was once the world's 4th largest lake and is now 1/10 of its original size, as a result of over-irrigation for cotton farming. So these kind of things really shocked me because I felt like I was actually a fairly well-educated person. You know, I'd gone to university, I'd worked for a while, but I had no idea that any of this existed. And I guess I felt that I was unintentionally buying into the system that I actually didn't agree with, but I had no idea, so I didn't have the power to actually change that. So this set us off on a whole sort of different tangent, or kind of aligned, but basically tracing where our cotton came from and ensuring that we were using the most environmentally friendly cotton options that are available. So our cotton is all rain-fed as well as being organic. A lot of cotton is grown using about 4 crops each year, so they'll grow 4 crops a year, and they'll artificially create an environment through irrigated water and huge amounts of chemicals and pesticides to make that cotton grow that quickly. So our cotton is just grown 1 crop per year. It's timed in with the rainy season, so there's no requirement for any additional chemicals. Some of the farming techniques are really interesting. It's actually how all cotton was grown about 50 years ago, before we've had this like massive spike in consumption. But so the farmers will plant beans between cotton rows. They use a bit of a concoction of neem leaves and cow urine, which kind of sounds a bit gross as well, but to spot spray on the plants, and that wards off bugs. So there's all these natural, actual ways to make this cotton grow, and for it to be viable, it does cost a little bit more, it does take a little bit longer, but the end result is that the environment and the surrounding community is not harmed. So this is where we get our cotton from. We work with 2 different cooperatives in East India. I go visit there every year. This was taken end of last year. And all the farmers are small-scale farmers, so most of them have about 1 to 2 acres of farms within their family units. And then they also do other crops and different little micro ventures on the side, and especially during the non-cotton growing seasons. All of our cotton is ginned locally within the same area, so that's all really localised, and then it's transported to a mill to be spun. So this is the process from getting it in from the big cotton bales into eventually the fine thread. So it starts off like these kind of big tubes, and then it ends up in these thin kind of strands, which is probably what you're more familiar with, like what you'd sew a button on with a piece of thread. These are the same ones. This is a process called knitting. So this machine basically takes in all the cotton from the top, spins it around, and that's what creates fabric. We're quite unique in that we do all of this in-house, so we have direct kind of control over that production schedule as well, which means that we're able to be a bit more efficient and reduce our lead times. But we're super involved in our factory. So this is one that we set up about 18 months ago, and we're the exclusive client for this factory. And again, there's both a social reason for that and also a really great business reason. So socially, we can be really involved in knowing what's going on in everyone's lives, being able to support in terms of if people run into problems with debt or anything, we're able to provide support where we can. But also, it's really great because we're able to switch around productions really quickly. We've got full control over the manufacturing, and if we need to pull something off the line to get an urgent order through, that gives us that flexibility as well. So I'm in India about 3 times a year, just heading over again in about 3 weeks. And we also have a full-time person on the ground who's in the factory pretty much every second day. So with our profits, we reinvest them into community development projects. So I'm really passionate and believe that the people that make our clothing deserve to have a higher percentage of the returns from the business. They do the majority of the work, and so we shouldn't be paying them the absolute minimum. Living wages are really important, especially in developing countries, to enable people to break that cycle of poverty. They don't need our charity, they just need our support and to pay a fair wage for the products and services that they provide. We have been kind of setting up also an additional side thing where we do provide some additional funding for community-related projects, and that's decided by the community, not by us. And that's been a learning thing as well. When I first started out, again, being quite naive and maybe not fully understanding the implications of impact work, and also the real ease of getting it wrong, I think we made some mistakes inadvertently. So one example I'll just share, we funded, actually this lady here, her cousin, we funded her through schooling. So she actually finished high school end of last year. She really proudly ran out and showed me her high school diploma, which we'd been funding her schooling for the last couple of years. And 3 years ago, I thought, oh, this is a really great thing for us to do. It's a really win-win, easy project that we can make a huge difference. And of course, yeah, she finished school, that's great. But something I never considered was that now her mum's biggest concern was that her daughter was too educated for her to be able to afford the dowry for her to get a suitable husband. Because in India, the more educated the girl is, the more educated the boy needs to be, and therefore the more expensive the dowry is. Now this is so far from my context of what I've grown up in, or what even I would even consider could happen, but that's so normalised in India. And so that really signalled to me that we actually can't really be so involved or even deciding what we think is good for them, because we're so far removed. So all of those decisions now are completely not made by me. They're made by local people, because they just understand the context far more than I ever could. So that was a real learning sort of experience for me. I've shared quite a few of these stories and things on our Little Yellow Bird blog, so feel free to jump in and have a look at that. But through all of this, we have made what I think is some really good headway and some significant impact on the communities, and also improving our industry generally. So last year alone, we saved over 12 million litres of water by simply choosing to source rain-fed cotton instead of alternatives. So you can see how that can add up really, really quickly. We now provide our customers with an individualised impact report so that they can see the exact impact that they generate from purchasing products through us, compared to purchasing them through one of our competitors. Now all this looks really great, and it looks like we've been this reasonably successful business, and we are in quite a good space now. So we employ 4 people here in Wellington. We've got our own office. I guess we could say that we're profitable. We put all of our profits, as I said, into impact projects or growing the company. But that's only kind of one half of the story. And again, I've shared a lot of this sort of learnings on our blog. But some of the things that you kind of don't see when you're looking in on a company is all the actual difficulties and hardships that they often faced. So over our 3 years, there's been at least twice where we were about to throw in the towel because we just simply did not have the resources to keep going. I remember one time actually, it was the timing was just kind of crazy, where we'd called a board meeting and said, that's it, there's no money left, it's impossible to keep going. How do we kind of exit gracefully and wrap this up and it still be a really positive thing? Because no matter what happens at this point, we've learned so much and have achieved a good amount of things. And that very afternoon, we got a phone call, and it was our first major client, and we'd basically been awarded a $100,000 contract in that very afternoon. So, I don't know, sometimes maybe luck plays into it a little bit, and good timing, but that gave us enough cash flow and enough resources and enough, I guess, belief that we were doing something that other people valued to keep going. But there's been heaps of times along that journey, and I mean, that first major order that we got in and had manufactured, again, we were just so naive and didn't know the right processes or the right elements to add in at the right places, and we ended up with about $30,000 worth of damaged product when it arrived in New Zealand. And so for a company operating on like basically an oily rag, having to stump up with $30,000 worth of damaged product, that wasn't really our fault actually. It was a fault with the manufacturer. They had embroidered the logos in the wrong position. It was really, really tough. And that was another time that, looking back, we all sat down and we said, can we even do this? Like, do we have the skills? Do we even know what we're doing? Because, like, how have we made this mistake? But again, we were really intentional around committing to what we had done and taking on that loss ourselves, not putting that on our suppliers because we had set ourselves up as being an ethical company, or putting it on our customers who it wasn't their fault either. And again, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of luck. We committed to paying this and we didn't have the money at all. And I think it was about 2 weeks later this time, we got a call from an American company and they had this order for us, and they said, oh, can you do these like several hundred shirts and can you send them to America? And like we were like, oh, we're not even getting it right in New Zealand, so but we didn't tell them that, and we said yes. And then I jumped on a plane to India to like make sure the logos were absolutely correct. And we sent them off, and that deal actually paid for the one we had made as the mistake prior. So I guess in that, like, you've got to kind of, keep going, and if you believe in it, it might not always work out, but if you're still there and you really believe in your mission, then good things can come out of it. So this leads me on to sort of my next project. This is a brand new one. And this is also one of those kind of, I'm looking back at it at the moment and thinking it's a little bit random. But it all kind of links back to what my original intention was. And my original intention is about transforming this industry, making it better and making it more fair and equitable. So I came across this organisation called NEM recently, and they're basically providing funding for impact-driven projects. So I put up a proposal around a supply chain tracking system, and it was all community voted, and it got through. And so we announced it 2 weeks ago. They've given us $1.2 million to track our supply chain, or to build a supply chain tracking tool, which we're going to be using for launching and piloting with Little Yellow Bird, but eventually and hopefully using it for the entire industry. But this again, it kind of brings you sometimes back to all these like moral dilemmas, and often I find that there's not necessarily a perfect, and there's often, I guess, sometimes you have to weigh things up, because now I'm in this interesting position where I've had businesses, big fast fashion businesses approach me saying, oh, they'd love to use this as a marketing tool. And I'm like, well, that's not really what I'm trying to do here. But do you work with those organisations to try and change the industry, or do you not work with them? And I don't know what the answer is to that. We're still trying to work that out, because ideally fast fashion wouldn't be a thing that exists, but that's a really hard, big, chunky problem to kind of solve overnight. So we've been working on that. And then I just thought I would leave it with this photo, just because it's one of my favourite photos. So this is one of the self-help groups that we work with in India at our cotton co-op. And I'm just always so moved by how happy those people are. And they have so much less than what I have. And every time I go there, they're just so generous. Everyone wants me to come and have lunch with them. And, that's a big deal for them. They all have, minimal money, but they're so generous and so happy and so kind. And it always makes me reflect and think about focusing on the simple things in life. And I think often we try to overcomplicate things. So I've been on a real, I guess, personal journey over the last few years, but even more so, maybe in the last 12 months, as I've, I guess, just grown up a little bit more and matured and have had time to reflect a bit more on what our business means and what we're doing. And so I try to be really intentional around, outside of clothing, I have not purchased new clothing. I mean, I obviously get Little Yellow Bird clothing for free, but I don't really buy other clothing. There was still other areas in my life where I was like, I actually could be doing a lot better. So I've really reduced my meat consumption, and I'm not super diligent about that. If I feel like a burger, I'll have a burger, but I'd probably not eat meat. I'd eat meat maybe once a fortnight, which is a huge difference for me. I haven't used a recyclable paper cup in over a year. Even the compostable ones, I think that they still require resources, and so my rule for myself now is if I don't have my Keep Cup, I don't get a coffee. And once you start training yourself to think like that, you remember to bring your Keep Cup, because otherwise you can't have a coffee. But yeah, so there's all these like little things that we can all do to make a huge impact, and yeah, there's still areas that I'm trying to improve on, but that's been our journey, so I hope that was interesting. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me or email me anytime. I always recommend people just in New Zealand to ask anyone out for coffee, because that's been a huge benefit to me. And most people will have coffee with you in New Zealand if you ask them, and then you get 30 minutes of free advice or learn something new or meet someone new, which is cool. And yeah, cool. Thanks.